Welcome everyone to Los Libertinos podcast. I am your host, Carlos Abelard, and this is episode 18 with Chingazos and Fire special edition 9/11 Afghanistan conflict. Our guest today is Kyle Anzalone. He is our first repeat guest, and for good measure because when I wanted to do a 9/11 special show, I wanted to reach out to Kyle since I've been listening to his podcast that he hosts with Will Porter called Conflicts of Interest for the last year. It's already probably been about a year that I've been jamming you guys, and the reason too is because we're kind of out of the conflict now, and it's been declared that we split basically, but for anybody out there that wants to get more of a personal take and maybe Kyle's general take on different topics, please check out episode 2, and you'll get some of that. On this one, it's mostly going to be 9/11, Afghanistan, foreign policy talk, and I guess let's get into it, Kyle, if you don't mind.
No, let's go for it, Carlos.
All right, let's do it. So it's been 20 years. I would have been 18 years old when it happened. It would have happened after high school. I was in college, and I remember it my way. I am older than you, so kind of what I wanted to do with this episode was to freestyle a lot of your perspective from since 2001. 9/11, when you were a kid and how that kind of affected you, and kind of the journey that you've had and the relationship you've had with this event, because you're not a normal person that has a relationship with it, because you're someone that talks about foreign policy as what you do, in your life, so could you kind of I guess would be a good way to start would be how was your day on 9/11, 2001?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I was 10 years old because my birthday is not this month. So I would turn 11 like around the time the war starts. But 9/11, it's about my birthday. I'm 10 years old, almost 11. And before school every morning, we would go to my buddy Bobby's house, and then his mom would drive, us and him to school. And I remember that, we go over there in the morning, and there's some time before school, so we go in the basement and play and stuff, and we didn't keep track of time. So I just remember his mom going, "Oh my God, we're so late," and that never happened. So I was kind of freaking out about being late to school. I do remember seeing the building smoking on the TV at his house. But other than that, I have no memory from that. When I got to school, nobody cared that we were late, which I thought was really weird. And then we went to class, and the teacher, actually, it was art class, I remember, and the teacher had it on. I forget the lady's name, but she gave me a C in art when I was in 3rd grade. So I do remember that about her. But she had the TV on and stuff, and I just I do remember not understanding it. I was 10 years old. New York New York City could have been anywhere to me. I was from St. Louis. It just, I didn't have an emotional reaction to it on the day, or anything like that. I do remember at lunch, my buddy Bobby did say something about how the St. Louis Arch could be Nets, and that scared me a little bit. But at the time, the teachers were smart enough to be no, that's ridiculous. They went after the 9/11 towers. The Nets target isn't the St. Louis Arch. Nobody cares about that thing, and they'd be doing the city the favor in a demo anyways. But so yeah, so that's most of what I remember about the day. I remember when I got home, it was on TV, but again, I was just kind of too young to care or understand it. But I do remember starting the next day, it pretty quickly became there are people who are dangerous and who will kill you and your family, and this is something we have to be scared of from now on. And I do remember by the time I was 12 or 13, I was terrified. I guess not necessarily of like Muslim people, but just like that, my favorite football team or whatever, there would be a suicide attack at that game or at the Super Bowl or Christmas. And it's not just like I was some dumb kid. It was like every Saturday on the news or Sunday on the news, they were talking about how we're at a code or level orange now. And, that means there's a heightened level 4 attack and they could be looking at popular stadiums or football games. And like that really, I loved football, so that's what resonated with me. And it scared the hell out of me that I was going to be like watching my favorite football team play and like a bomb would go off, or that me and my family would go to the mall and some guy would set off a bomb or start shooting everything up. Like these were like, I was really scared like when I was a kid. And I remember like the first time I flew after 9/11 wasn't until I was like 18 or 19, but like I remember like going to the airport, like you just have like this in the back of your head where it's like, what if somebody does something to the plane? You know what I mean? And so like I feel like it was really heavily conditioned. Now the other part of the conditioning wasn't just the fear of terrorism, but it was, and this was far more heavy, it was the worship of the troops. And they're defending our freedoms, and you could only go to school and play football and watch football and do all this great stuff because there's people over there making sure the bad people, the meme of the soldier like this over the little girl's bed with all the knives in his bed. I mean, like I really believe that. And we had things in school like writing letters to the soldiers, and like that was around the time where like if you went to a baseball game and there's a soldier in your like section, like everybody stood up and clapped for him. And or getting on and off the plane, the time when like the grown men in your lives would like tear up during the national anthem, or had the whole like Toby Keith, we'll stick a boot up your ass attitude kind of thing. And that's, I mean, I feel like that's what sat most with me most of the time. One of the things that was very much hit home was, and what, I don't remember this whole story or anything, but it was a big deal. There's like 300 Canadian soldiers that were either injured or killed by an American bomb in Iraq. The pilot like missed the target and dropped the bomb. And that pilot just happened to like go to the same high school that I ended up going to, or the sister high school, I forget which one. But even in that case, everybody was like, you can't punch a soldier, they're just doing what they need to do to keep us safe. And so it really like there was no concern over like the civilians at all. Another thing I will say is it wasn't until I was high school and watched an episode of South Park did I ever see a Afghan child that wasn't like on some like in need of humanitarian aid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what they show the starving kids in Africa and stuff like that. And like, but that doesn't humanize them at all, right? It was South Park, that dumbass show that actually had like an Afghan kid walking around, like articulating how he felt about things, which I'm sure it's not exactly accurate, but the fact that like, this kid just exists with thoughts and feelings, and like that's like the first time it was like talked about. And that's another thing, like throughout my entire time at school, the war was like too political to discuss, and so the only thing that happened was all like the rallies saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day. Had this kid in my class who I don't know why the hell the teachers let him do this, because I'm sure like conditioned fear in all of us, but he had an alarm on his watch that went off every day at 9/11. I remember this. Yes. And it was just like beep, 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 beep. And then he would turn it off. Right. And like, he would never like go on, but like every day at 9/11. And I was with this kid through 8th grade in middle school. We went to different high schools, so I don't know, but through 8th grade in middle school. So that was like 4 or 5 years I'm in this kid's class, and every day beep, 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 beep at 9/11.
Are you serious? Okay. Well, I mean, I guess it's not at the, who knows, who knows what kind of, why that would have been the case. So then South Park, was that, did that give you, was that the game changer a little bit? That kind of was like, because
no, but it was, I do distinctly remember it was like the first time that like I saw an Afghan child that wasn't like starving. And was, like the stupid South Park animation. It's not actually an Afghan child, but like, you know what I mean? Like just like this independent person who wasn't like a future terrorist or anything like that.
Or being
It
spoken,
would,
or being
yeah,
spoken, or where the media was putting their thoughts out. Like it seemed like it was a real person to you. Like, hey, it's actually somebody that's talking that
yeah.
isn't part of the narrative that they put out of fear or something.
But that didn't change my mind. I was a pretty fierce war hawk in high school. And like, I mean, in one sense, like I was, 15, 16, 17. So like, what the hell do I know? Nobody should have been listening to me, but I was on the debate team at my high school. And so like, we were debating these issues and, I would read the positions of like, the Bush administration officials. And I mean, they made it pretty explicitly clear that like any Muslim could possibly kill you. And so, if we kill, some Iraqis in the process of, making sure that you're safe, that they should be showing us they're terrorists. It's because they hide them amongst their ranks and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say, but like, if that's your perspective and that's like, kind of what you're reading and getting into, like, yeah, you're not going to have a problem with like killing a bunch of Iraqis. And, as much as in the 20, or that have been 16 election, I think it was Ted Cruz was like talking and like had his like little giddy happy boy face and was like kind of bouncing his step when he's talking about like nuking Syria and stuff like that. And like, now I'm absolutely horrified and disgusted by it. But, when I was like 16 years old and I was like into this stupid tribalism and believed in like this, clash of civilizations, the Muslims would never be happy until all the Christians converted or were dead or at least wrapped up their women so there were no midi skirts or boobies to be seen and stuff like that. I'm just being honest, like, and it's not like I was like a grown adult who like I just was listening to like what the like smart people on TV, and like I was reading the news. It's not like I was just like listening to like a half hour of Sean Handy. Like I was really paying attention. And so, I mean, there were people, in the mainstream against the war at this time. And, I was just a Republican partisan. So I was against that. But in my freshman year of college, I found Ron Paul. And then, once I start getting into his stuff and like the Giuliani moment, like I don't remember it at the time, but I do remember watching it in college and that being like a major game changer.
Game changer. Yeah, fair enough. I think for a lot of people it was. Yeah. And for me, I would have been 18, and I guess my initial reaction too was yeah, like I remember telling my mom or something like, oh yeah, we're probably already going to go bomb them or something. Like it was no big, it was like, oh, okay. But I didn't take it too serious. But in that same time, like the 10 years afterwards, I've always been a fan of like Bill Maher. So Bill Maher would have been like anti-war at the time. So I would have been getting that on his shows. So I never just took it in that way. But I mean, I can understand why, and if you're on that team, why you can go that way. So
yeah, can I just go a couple more examples from my childhood? Some guy had for years on end a giant American flag spray painted in his front yard along one of the bigger roads in town. And then the whole like, if you're not with us, you're against the terrorist thing, like that kind of that kind of mentality that we're seeing a lot right now is I do remember very distinctly, and something that I really felt like if you weren't pro-war, if you weren't for bombing them, you were essentially for more attacks in the United States. And that's, and so like you hate the ditzy chits and you call them freedom fries, and anybody else who's even vaguely not pro enough war is like a dirty red commie who you can't trust, who you shouldn't want your community. And yeah, when they're like, oh, maybe I'll move to Canada, get the hell to Canada. Like, get out of my country. Come on. You want to bomb these people? You think like those are actually people with thoughts and feelings and who like get a life and stuff like that? Nah. No, that's not how it works. America is America, and we deserve, every American deserves, to have the safety at no matter what cost. And so we could kill anybody we want to make that happen. And I mean, that seemed like perfectly, reasonable.
Yeah, what you're saying, yeah, like you said, it sounds like yeah, for sure you sound like a partisan, right? Like Republican, even like a Fox News kind of partisan guy that you're repeating the talking lines that you probably remember from back then, right? You could already just do them. So then there's people then that also never got out of that mindset. Is what was the game changer for you? Like it was getting into Ron Paul slash like libertarianism and just being taught a different perspective, or you're bringing up these memories that you were talking about. Did you at the like at the time did you have some counter thoughts and they just stayed there, but they never really grew into anything because so much of the propaganda was on top that they never, or do you just reflect on them like, oh man, I get it. There was a lot of like, can looking back, can you like see why you were thinking the way you were, or kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I guess it's like a combination of things. Like one is just getting older and maturing, like as like your brain develops, like you're able to like feel more empathy for people. That I mean, that's just part of being a human, especially being a male. But I think a part of it was like just when I went to college, like the culture changed where like it wasn't like as much like flag waving rah rah. It was like get drunk and party and stuff like that. And so that, I mean, just it's a different world to be in. I mean, you don't get constantly reinforced. I don't think I watched a lot of TV in college. I feel like that made a difference. I watched a lot of like network TV growing up, and so NCIS and Agent Gibbs and all those, stopping the bad guys kind of thing is once you kind of get don't watch that all the time and it's not quite so reinforced all the time, then when you tune back in, it's easier to see the propaganda. But I guess for me, it's like I'm just like more of like a logic based and like analytical kind of person. And so when I was in high school and on the debate team, we were arguing about the Iraq war and the benchmarks and if it was working and if the surge worked and the war the potential war in Georgia and all these different things. And then once you just read Ron Paul and hear what this guy has been saying and has said, it's kind of hard not to deny that he's right. And that I mean that changes your mind pretty fast, even if you do have all this emotional conditioning and all this past stuff that you said was so pro-war. Once you kind of realize that you were wrong and you realize, what it means to be wrong on the war issue, you kind of got to change your mind. It's not like, or you just have to, I guess, tune out and engage in a lot of cognitive dissonance. And so it was that. And, I like had some friends and like, we would smoke around or sit around, smoke pot and, talk politics and this kind of stuff. And I think it was just like kind of that environment. It wasn't like the college, like going to classes that I feel like I learned a lot, but like, like the people I was around and like having conversations about this stuff, like, just making you think about different perspectives and everything it was another just part of it and breaking it down. And and just not being is like enmeshed in like the whole like you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance when you're at home during the football game kind of thing, or the national anthem.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. So you brought up Ron Paul, we brought up the Giuliani moment, and this kind of leads a little bit to my kind of one of my questions here. He in the video in the Giuliani moment, he kind of brought up, do you know why they hate us? They don't hate us because we're free. They hate us because we're over there. And in 1998, it was when Bin Laden had issued like his jihad or fatwa or whatever, the fatwa, and he had 3 grievances. Could you kind of go over those 3 grievances, and then I guess, do you think they were justified?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure his 3, and I hope I get it right, was the occupation of Saudi Arabia, the occupation of the land of the 2 holy places, the Israeli occupation of Palestine, and then I think it was the continued bombing and sanctions on Iraq. But if I got that third
No,
one
that's
wrong,
it. Yeah, that's
okay.
it.
Yeah, and so I mean, here's the thing: Osama bin Laden is a sociopathical nut job who his goal was to carry out this attack to draw the United States into Afghanistan, because to him, the life of an Afghan matters no more than, to George Bush or Dick Cheney, right? And so he knew that if he could drag the US into there, that the Afghan people would never comply, that they would, fight the occupation forever, and that eventually the US would lose and it would cost us trillions of dollars and thousands of lives. And in that way, like, Osama bin Laden was like the tactical genius who got, just with a few planes that weren't even his and 20 men, baited the United States into fighting a war in the middle of Central Asia that, has cost us trillions of dollars. I mean, just not to, I'm not trying to praise the guy or say anything good about him, but from his perspective, his plan worked. You know what I mean? And so that's something that we have to realize. Now, to his grievances, the U.S. had soldiers and was, stationing our warplanes in Saudi Arabia because we buy off that government, and we're continuing to bomb Iraq through the 1990s. I think several airstrikes a day, and I mean, we just wrecked that country. Just like when you drop bombs on streets every day, you start to destroy sewage systems and stuff like that. Over time, and water systems, and so people can't get water into their homes and sewage out. It just adds to the number of children who are going to die from different diseases. That combined with the fact that we were like bombing formula factories at the same time Iraqi children were starving to death. It was just, what the U.S. was doing in Iraq in the 1990s was unconscionable. Does that mean that Osama bin Laden was right to kill 3,000 American citizens? In response, no. But it was just one of the most horrific things that has happened. And if you want to really see how bad it was, just go to the 60 Minutes clip of Madeleine Albright saying that was worth it. And I mean, I don't know how you could watch that and not feel a little sick to your stomach. I can't talk all about the occupation of Palestine by Israel, or else we'll be here for like 3 days, Carlos. But this is what is now acknowledged by Human Rights Watch, an apartheid system in Israel, where you have two tiers of justice. You have people who have their home, like their lives subsidized by the Israeli state, and you have people who have their homes stolen by the Israeli state. And that's just not acceptable to a lot of people in the Muslim world. Just like there's a lot of people in Texas who thought was absolutely unacceptable that Osama bin Laden attacked New York. They likewise, people in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, just because it's not Palestine doesn't mean that they don't see that community. And so
that's a good point. That's a good point. I never heard like say it that way. That's right. Like, yeah, a lot of people in Texas, us being like, we're a nation, but really, yeah, like specifically someone like in Texas that believes in, that rhetoric of secession or one state and all that. Yeah, they looked at something like at New York and they would have been, hey, we got to do whatever we got to do, but it's the same thing. Yeah, that's right, man.
And especially, it was probably the same Tetson that, September 1st, 2001 was like, damn Yankees and everything else. But, when an outside like oppressor is coming in, it kind of rallies support. And I believe two of the 9/11 hijackers, at least Mohammed Atta, actually in response to Israeli war crimes on Palestinians. That's why he signed his name and decided to be one of the suicide hijackers. Like it was because of the Israeli war crimes that he did it. And it's because the United States gives Israel cover at the UN. We veto any resolution that would condemn Israel. We provide Israel with $3 to $4 billion in aid every year, a lot of it in military aid. They're bombing Palestinians in F-35s and F-16s. And, they know who the world empire and superpower is and who makes the, backing of the Israeli government possible. And so, that's why they end up targeting the United States. And so, yeah, I think I hit on all of them. And if I missed anything or you want me to expand on anything,
well, I was just gonna say, listening to you talk about Albright on that video where she talks about all the lives that were necessary for, I remember that was something that I remember as a kid, but I didn't know. I would hear that the terms like no fly zone over Iraq, but it just sounds like, okay, they're just protecting from now, I guess no one fly. I mean, it wasn't even something I thought about, but I mean, at that time too, I remember them talking about, but they're just using smart bombs okay, so like even as a kid, I was like, okay, well then they're smart bombs, I didn't even question. I was like, okay, they must be smart bombs, or they just, but as you guys talk about in your podcast and stuff, there's not really anything like a smart bomb, right? There's always a lot of destruction in this stuff, and that's where a lot of these killings go, right? I mean, like, yeah, I mean,
Well,
there's
yeah,
not a
how
smart
much?
bomb.
Right. How much probably, especially like, growing up during the terror war, like the Reaper drone and the Predator drone and the flyovers at all the games, and they have the Abrams tanks, and like you just kind of get into like all the military equipment and everything like that. But like the smart bomb is a particularly nefarious thing because it's like, it doesn't matter if the bomb is smart or not, if the intelligence is bad. If the person deciding who's dropping the bomb is a dumbass who decides to blow up a bunch of children, then the bomb isn't smart. It just goes to the target. Maybe you could call it a less inaccurate bomb. Like that would at least be like a name to describe kind of what it is compared to a dumb bomb, right? A smart bomb just has more guidance in it. That's the difference between the two. But people hear smart bomb and they assume that, well, when the terrorist goes to take a crap after dinner, we could hit that side of the house and blow him up, and the family then no longer has to deal with the terrorists, and that's just a solution. Not that that's what they think happens, and then it turns out dad isn't even a terrorist and he killed an innocent guy, but when you blow up half the house, the other part of the house falls over, and so you crush everybody but like the 7-year-old who has to watch all 10 members of her family be drug away, and knows that could see the shrapnel that Lockheed Martin made the bomb, knows who dropped it.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. So when you had spoken about one of those suicide bombers, that kind of got me thinking about the whole event of 9/11. I wasn't a 9/11 truther. I kind of kept that at a distance. There was no reason why. I mean, I remember just watching all the videos too and all that and being like, oh man, there's some shady shit here. And to me, always the Building 7 stuff, just I didn't like the feeling of that, but I also didn't put too much weight on it. I don't know why I didn't. But anyway, what was your take on the whole 9/11 truth time? What was, I'm guessing you would have watched a lot of the same videos that I did at the time. What was your take on all that?
I mean, I didn't really buy into any of it because I really, believed it was the terrorists for the most part. I will say though, especially for like when I was in high school and then in college too, it was just like, I would say almost the popular opinion among my peers that it would like the 9/11 truther. Like I had buddies that went to school and like 9/11 truther shirts and stuff like that. Maybe not like InfoWars, but like just like 9/11 truth and stuff like that. um so I don't know, I feel like by the time I kind of got into like the good side on foreign policy, I did watch like the Alex Jones stuff, but I never was like convinced that was Bush or anything like that. Now, I guess I did go through a time where I was very suspicious that maybe they let it happen. I'm not so sure of that now. I think I'm more towards government incompetence is just kind of where I lead now. But there was definitely, I mean, look, when you realize what happened and how much they lied to us and exploited us and enriched themselves, and these are the people that taught how much we have to love, value, respect our soldiers, and how if you don't support the war, you're tarnishing what they're doing, and you're making it more likely that they're going to die and all this. And then the other time they're providing them with substandard equipment so they can make more money. I mean, well, once you realize that, you have to at least like look into the truth or stuff a little bit. You'd be crazy not to.
Yeah, I hear you. What is your take on Building 7? Is it just whatever the engineers kind of say? I mean, that one's a little funky, right? I mean, even that one, I was like, how, what's up with that one? And I think there was even another, what is your take on that? Is it just, what do you think on that?
I really don't know. That was like one thing I did spend a lot of time looking into, particularly was Building 7, just because it does seem like there's something wrong with it. I guess at this point, I just like I do think it was a legitimate terrorist attack. You know what I mean? And so I don't know what happened. I can't explain it to anyone. I can't make that argument, so I don't want to like set off the crowd on either side. Like, oh, he can't even explain it, but this is exactly what happened. I have read all the theories, and I couldn't be 100% on everything. So it's just one of those things. Like I haven't invested enough time in, especially not recently. If anything like new has come up on it, but there are just a lot of parts of what happened on 9/11 just don't sit right with people. And I mean the part that I spend the most time on, which is like the 28 pages kind of stuff, the Saudi connection,
Oh, that's
because I
right,
do
man.
think there are like Saudi officials who that's kind of where I lean on the side of conspiracy, is the fact that you had the Saudi Prince Bandar, affectionately known as Bandar Bush, right? And the Saudis get to leave DC on 9/11. All this other kind of crazy stuff that happened does, make me suspect that there was something very wrong with how all, I don't know exactly what, I can't explain all of it. I do think that the Saudis were probably contributing more to the hijackers at a higher level of the government than we currently publicly know. But until the Congress or somebody releases the information, then it is all speculation. And people could point to engineering things that at least do have basis in science. It's not what they the people who say that the building fell for the fire and all the other reasons. It's not completely absurd or anything like that. It's not like they're telling you the sky is green.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for checking out the show. Be sure to support our efforts here by checking out palomaverdecbd.com. It is a online store that my wife and I run, and you get 25% off by using the promo code Chingazos. And just in case you guys don't know, it's not in my nature to be interviewing people like this, but if you like what I'm putting out, just know that I'm on some CBD. I take a gummy about an hour before I know I'm going to do the show, and about 20 minutes before the show, I'll take some drops, just takes the edge off, and then I just get into it. So if that's something that sounds like, oh, in your life you do some other stuff that might benefit you to take the edge off before you get into some shit, try some CBD products. So go to palomaverdecbd.com, use the promo code Chingazos, get 25% off anything in the store. Peace. All right. So from the Mujahideen to the Soviets losing and leaving in 89 to the Taliban taking power in 1996, can you kind of speak to the origins of all of those events then that led to the Taliban rule in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I'll do my best. If anybody wants like a really like comprehensive thing, especially on the Soviet area time, Eric Margulies has a great book, War at the Top of the World. And I mean, he was there, I mean, he was with the Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan during the resistance to the Soviets. So, he could tell the story like nobody else can. The guy's a hell of a writer and storyteller. So if you really want like all the details there, but, the US saw an opportunity in Afghanistan to arm the resistance to the communist bad Soviet government in that country, and essentially draw the Russians in, and they called it giving the Russians their own Vietnam. Right? They wanted to bait the Russians into like a never-ending conflict that they couldn't possibly win. And then once they baited the Russians in, they gave the resistance to the Soviet government different kinds of arms and stuff like that. Now, there are a lot of pieces to the Mujahideen and the Soviet resistance. A lot of people will be like, oh, it's Bin Laden. Oh, it's the Taliban. Oh, it's the Northern Alliance. And it was really all of them. And so this is where, Bin Laden, I think, I don't know, maybe he had been to Afghanistan before, but I think this is where he makes a lot of roots in Afghanistan. I think there's a lot of different translations of Al-Qaeda, but one of them in the general sense is the network. And so one of the things that he was doing was networking with Arab fighters to come to Afghanistan to fight. And so you could kind of see that, as later in life he coordinates a terrorist attack, maybe he honed some of those skills at this time when he was backed by the United States. And this is one of the reasons that you don't arm rebels in different countries, because you don't really know what you're doing. But part of that too, arms went to the Taliban and they became a more substantial fighting force. But also the opponents of the Taliban, the Northern Alliance, some of those warlords were a part of the Mujahideen and the resistance too. And then once the Soviets left, I don't think the Taliban immediately started or continued. It more kind of went towards different warlords held different territory. The Northern Alliance held their own territory. So, warlords like Dostum, Massoud, Noor, Hekmatyar, people might recognize those names. They hold territory during this time. And then it's, I think, around 1995 that the Taliban really come in and start taking territory. And the warlords were brutal. And so in some respects, I think the Taliban were, I don't want to make it out to be like the Taliban were liberators or anything like that at all. But there were aspects of the warlord culture that was worse than the Taliban. And I'm sure the Taliban had other bad aspects, their public executions of women and stuff like that was absolutely horrific during this time. But they take, I don't know, you say 2/3 of the country or so over the next 5 or 6 years. And they do it with the backing of the Pakistani ISI, which of course Pakistan is not a in-name ally, but a partner of the US. And so that's definitely something to remember during this time, is that the US doesn't have a problem with this. Around 2000, the Taliban control Kabul and a lot of the country. They start to seek international recognition, but they don't control all the country. That's really important. And one of the things that for international recognition that the community wants is to eradicate the opium, the poppy trade in the country, and it really dips. And so if anybody looks at a graph, in 2001, before the U.S. starts and gets involved there, there's really no opium production in Afghanistan. It's very minimal, and that's because that was a project of the Taliban seeking international recognition.
Oh, I never heard of that. That's cool. I mean, so yeah, that was them. So even right now, when people think, oh, the Taliban's has a PR to try to be better, they were already trying to get be legit in the eyes of the international community by doing something like that even back then.
Right. And so, and one of the things that happened, and I think I'm pretty sure this is how it goes, and I think this is right, I'm not wrong on this, that the Taliban kind of inherit Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora, Afghanistan. I don't think it's necessarily that he goes there to hide out because the Taliban are in charge. I think that, he was there under the, Afghan code where he's a Muslim resistance fighter. So as long as he's not planning any international terrorist attacks, the Taliban were letting him stay. And something to remember, most of 9/11 wasn't planned in Afghanistan. One thing that when I was growing up that never made any sense to me is they always showed these terrorist training camps that we're supposed to be worried about, and it's some playground equipment, right? And I never
was about to say, yes, man. The music too, right? The music and all that stuff, right? I haven't thought about that in a long time, and that's yes.
And I never understood how climbing across the set of monkey bars would make it more likely that you could hijack a plane. But the scary music was enough and everything like that. I hadn't thought about that till now either. It's such a crazy thing that they would always show this B-roll footage of these guys essentially playing on playground equipment. These grown-ass men dressed like ninjas playing on playground equipment, and these were the people who are gonna come kill you in the middle of the night, right? Yeah, so Osama bin Laden is a problem for the Taliban. They tell Osama bin Laden he can't plan international terrorist attacks there, and they largely planned the attack in Karachi, Pakistan, Malaysia, Germany, and San Diego. They got their flight training in the United States. So I mean, I'm not trying to like make a whole bunch of excuses here or anything like that, but there is a lot of nuance to this. It's not just like, the Pakistan or the Taliban were like, now that we control Afghanistan, hell yeah, let's invite our old buddy Osama bin Laden back so he could plot a terrorist attack against the Americans, which really was like, I feel like if I had told people that in 2011, 2008, 2000, they would believe that. There's no doubt. Like they might have thought like it's a little ham-handed of a narrative, but that's about like it. Like that's generally true, they thought. And so, but that's not really the case at all. And then, of course, after 9/11, the U.S. is mostly concerned about establishing an air base at the Bagram airfield. So they got most of their troops there. They do have like some assets, some special forces trying to get the Osama bin Laden and his few Al-Qaeda guys at Tora Bora. And they actually kill a good amount of them with airstrikes. But Osama bin Laden escapes over the border from Afghanistan, into Pakistan, which again, you would think like, wouldn't be even better, right? Like this is a country the U.S. has a military relationship with. This should be even easier to get the guy, but he hides out there for 10 years. In the meantime, the Taliban tried to surrender. They actually tried to turn over Osama bin Laden to the U.S. 3 times, and the U.S. rejected it every time.
I remember hearing about recently, even from you guys on your show, like, there's a lot of stuff, so yeah, I always, everybody go check out y'all's show, but yeah, they try to turn him in. I never heard about 3 times. Can you kind of talk about that? Because people that listen to the show, maybe like some people that don't get into a lot of this stuff would be like, what do you mean the Taliban try to turn over? They would have never even heard that, So what do you mean by that? It was, they could have gotten him and turned him over, but what, our government isn't going to deal with terrorists? Is that kind of that whole thing or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, remember in the days after 9/11, like it was only, I guess, heavily and they were right, speculate that Osama bin Laden was behind this. And so the Taliban's first demand, and they said that they knew where Osama bin Laden was, is that they would turn over Osama bin Laden to the United States. The US present evidence that Osama bin Laden was behind it. And the Bush administration's position was, I think, more or less, we don't negotiate with terrorists, no way. Plus, maybe they didn't have the evidence at the time, which I guess, how much evidence can you turn over like 2 days after 9/11 or something like that. But then I think a far like easier demand to like have agreed to was that the Taliban said that they would turn over Osama bin Laden to any Muslim country. And I believe this would have included like NATO ally Turkey, de facto ally Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. I mean, it wasn't even necessarily like we're going to send this guy to Saudi Arabia where we could guarantee, where we feel, like he'll get a fair trial or something like that. They're like, we just got to give him somewhere where it seems like there's going to be some level of due process. And then after that, they offered to give Osama bin Laden over to any third country. And so it could have at that point, I'm assuming, been like Australia or New Zealand, or like even I think like at that point, like Russia could have been an option or something. And remember, in the days after 9/11, Putin offered the US the old Soviet bases to help us get assets into Afghanistan, which in one sense may have been a little bit of a trap, but in the other, at the time, did seem like it was a real way to help the United States, because Afghanistan is a landlocked country. It's not easy to set up a whole bunch of military personnel there if you don't have staging bases in outside countries. And so being able to use old Soviet bases was, I think, very helpful to the Americans for that. Although it came with a lot of consequences. I think there was like a lot of pretty nasty like radiation and chemical weapons that they used at some of these bases. And of course, the Americans stayed there forever. The troops talk about like the way the mud would like turn to sludge and how it's like messed up. It's not proven, but they think it like messed them up pretty bad, may give them some crazy cancers and stuff like that.
No, man, I've never heard of that either. So what was so that would have been like all of, at least in the beginning for sure, would have been all the Bush years and all of the neocon perspective of trying to push a narrative of but Obama wasn't that much different on, he was different on like maybe the style of talking about Afghanistan, I guess. he would have called that. Well, I think he might have said that was the good war, right? Like being counter
Oh
to
yeah.
Iraq, right? That was the good war, and a lot of people. So that I talked to you about Bill Maher, and during the Bush years, all very anti-war and all that. Come Obama, that is the volume is lowered. It's there, but it's lowered, and that's when I kind of started seeing like the inconsistency of the anti-war left towards their own, I guess, right? So the left. Can you kind of give your take on the Obama years in relationship to Afghanistan and the war and all that?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what kind of happened during the Bush years is that the Taliban offered to surrender. They wouldn't take the surrender, and they decided to build a nation rather than just leaving Afghanistan after they had kicked the Taliban out. I mean, they had taught the Taliban a lesson. They should have just left after that, but they didn't. They stayed, and by like 2005, the Taliban insurgency is picking up, and then in like 2006, 2007 in Iraq, you had David Petraeus, the general over there, do something that they called the surge, and they claim it pacified the insurgency there. And so Obama took office with a growing insurgency in Afghanistan, and decided that they were going to replicate the move in Iraq and surge troops into Afghanistan. Now, there were different perspectives within the Obama administration. Biden wanted to do the smaller surge, but he did want to surge tens of thousands of troops into Afghanistan. Obama wanted to do like immediate one, and then he was strong-armed even more by the generals. Stanley McChrystal like did interviews and like was like, "Oh, I need so many more troops" and stuff like that. So Obama comes in, sends more troops to Afghanistan to do this military strategy that was the not brainchild, but largely advocated for. The main advocate at the time was General David Petraeus, and his acolyte Stanley McChrystal, a general, was going to go to Afghanistan, implement it. And the idea is that you're winning hearts and minds. The Bush administration was too mean; they just killed people. We're going to go in. We're going to provide a government in a box, they called it. We're going to provide these people with security, and they're going to be so happy with us that they're going to reject the Taliban. Of course, this failed miserably. Stanley McChrystal himself admitted that there's insurgency math. For every one insurgent you kill, you get 10 more. And so with numbers like that, you could never do anything militarily, but yet McChrystal tried, and then he got fired for being a brash, drunk idiot and insulting, I believe, Biden. And then he got fired, so they had David Petraeus do it, who of course didn't win the Afghan war, got a whole bunch of troops killed, then came back, became CIA director, had an affair with his mistress, gave her Obama's daily schedule, and somehow now gets to go on TV and tell us what's going on about Afghanistan, and isn't in jail like any other American would be. So I hate David Petraeus. I always have to add that he's such a disgraced philanderer, and was a CIA man that gave over state secrets to his mistress. I mean, just like how you could be the U.S. intelligence chief and get baited into what could have been a honeypot. I don't know if it was. It seems absolutely unbelievable, but he did. And then for the country not to be absolutely outraged at that, and he still like gets to go on cable news up to this day and tell the American people how they should think and feel about Afghanistan.
Man, I don't know. So listening to you right now talk about that, and maybe it's the the little bit of the drinking kicking in. I started thinking, well, I mean, I guess that mistress must have been pretty good, And then I started thinking, who's America's mistress? Is it this idea of the military that like we talking about how you can't say anything about the military? It's she's there always. It's this I don't know. I think I had recently posted something like, which war have we or in my lifetime, which wars have we ended or something, and people posted some, and then people started posting it. Like somebody put, "Hey, I think there's only been like a 7-year run in our country that has that we didn't have any wars going on or something." I don't know, man. Maybe I'm thinking a little weird, but yeah, I mean, what is it about you? I mean, I guess every country always has to look up in a way, and put their military at the top, because it's supposed to be a defensive way to it's a defensive tool, but the way that we use it, it's mostly always offensive. So I don't know, I guess you could skip that. I mean, I guess
No, I got a couple things for you
okay,
there.
okay.
So a part of it is propaganda, just especially anybody my age, just so indoctrinated by, like, you clap at the soldiers, you say thank you for your service, and that those people are the reason that you and your family get to enjoy a nice life. Like, that indoctrination goes deep. Also, there's I'm pretty sure it's Tom Secker. Man, I gotta look up this guy's name because I had to say I'm pretty sure every time, but he FOIAs like Hollywood movies and finds out, like, if you see a movie with an F-35 or like US military equipment, like the Transformers movies and stuff like that, well, the Pentagon lets these companies use that military equipment as long as they get a look at the script and get to do some altering and stuff like that. And so when you're growing up as a kid and you go to the movies and you see the Transformers thing, and you got, like, the awesome animated Transformers on the deck of the aircraft carrier, and you have these like really cool looking dudes like saluting next to them, and the F-35 is coming and landed. I like that, especially as a young boy, that stuff like really does like run deep in you and stuff. Also, our politicians are all liars and frauds. And so I think when you're looking at like a respectable institution, the military is like the least offensive. They make people the least mad the least often. Like, no, however you feel about like the courts, like they've probably ruled on something in the past 10 years that you absolutely can't stand and you hate. The same thing with like, most presidents and Congress. Like, Congress's approval rating is low, the Supreme Court's is low. The military's hangs around 50%. I guess another thing is that this certainly wasn't the case when I lived on the East Coast. New Hampshire was an exception, but Massachusetts, this wasn't the case. But like in St. Louis and now Colorado, where I live, in New Hampshire, like you drive down the road and like my son's in the Marine, on the back of their car, Vietnam vet, Iraq War vet, like you know what I mean, like you're just around vets all the time. And so like the what I mean. And when you talk about the military, in a sense, like when you're talking about the narrative, you're talking about the generals and what they say, because they're the ones on TV, they're the ones that talk to Congress, they're the ones that write policy. But I think sometimes when you ask people about the military, you're talking about my friend Tom. He's a good dude. Like, he's a straight talker. He might say some offensive stuff and we might not agree on everything, but usually, like, if a military guy, they're not somebody that's gonna lie to you, and like I think we project that reputation onto the entire military when really it's just like a feature of like kind of these men.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, man, like, so yeah, it runs deep, and especially in a country like ours where yeah, we've always been in military interventions. And yeah, man, it's but there's a little bit. Is there less of it now? Is there less of that, or do you feel that it's still, or is still in tribe, like still in the two camps? Man, I'm trying to get a read right now, but I think there's maybe less of it, or what do you think?
I feel like the fear has definitely like dialed down significantly. And it's just a matter of time. I mean, Paul Wolfowitz and Robert Kagan both had recent op-eds that were really terrifying, but also revealing. And in both of their op-eds, they write that, like, look, the American people aren't as afraid anymore. And so, I'm guessing that there's like tons of reasons, with time being maybe the biggest factor, the fact that people really don't care about foreign policy. I do think, like, for anything you could say about maybe the woke moment, the fact that like we do have to kind of realize that people around the world are people, does, like, I think for particular people on the left, you could very easily shame them into having their default position have to be anti-war. Not that they'll know anything about it, but if you're just like, dude, don't the lives of brown people matter? It's kind of hard for them to be like, no, I think it's okay to kill random Afghan families. Like, that kind of like Bush era thing is gone. And the fact that a lot of these things have been exposed as lies, like the weapons of mass destruction, have been like that is something that I do really think has been imprinted on my generation, is that the government lied about the weapons of mass destruction. The fact that you had to be worried that a terrorist was going to detonate a nuclear bomb in your town. There's a show called Jericho where this was like the plot of it, where they detonate, I think, like 28 nuclear bombs across the United States of America or something like that. And it's just that was never a real thing at all remotely. And so once you realize that somebody has scared you that much, like that is like hard to let go of. And so that I think adds to the fact that there's just like less fear. I'm sure there's a couple other things I'm not really thinking of, just people caring about other stuff.
Yeah, no, and it's real, man, because after Biden left, one of my buddies that, he'll call me every once in a while just to talk some shit about whatever. And he called me on this one and I told him, hey, what's up, man? Like, how's it, I know you're calling me for something. Let's talk, because he always likes to get into politics. And then I was like, hey, man, we lost. It's hard to win there. The terrain's bad. What are you going to do? And then he went and said, yeah, but now they can probably start working again to bring in a dirty bomb. And I go, and I said, dude, are you going back to one of those old classics, man? Those don't play anymore. What are you talking? Oh, yeah, it does. I was like, oh, come on. So, yeah, they go back to their original, a lot of those original, but they have a lot of power. I mean, I had to, for a split second, catch myself and be like, come on. But before I said, oh, come on, I was like, I pictured, a dirty bomb and something, right. It just, and your mind goes that way. But I can catch myself, but not a lot of people. Then people can easily get back into the mix of, oh shit, here comes the dirty bombs and all this stuff,
That is true. I mean, it was long enough ago now that we've even forgot that we were lied to about the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a group like I talk about, like, my peers and like, feeling like that was imprinted on them. But then there is a group that like is just completely ignorant and probably has no idea there's US troops in Iraq, or could even find Iraq on a map to this day. So I mean, it's all over the place. Yeah, but I mean, there's nothing left for Biden to do in Afghanistan. I mean, Trump tried to like a mini surge thing that didn't work at all. The best thing that Trump did, probably his entire time as a president, is sign the deal with the Taliban to eventually leave the country. If Biden made a mistake, it was staying 3 months too long. He should have left in May.
Should left in May. So that's the talking point right now that's coming out of that. That's what my buddy said, oh, if they would have just followed the timeline, and I was, I said, okay, but why didn't we, and all that. So what was what did Trump see in the Taliban that allowed him to make a deal? Was there third or fourth parties that were trying to say they're trying to like be better advocates for their country or something like that? Or was it just that Trump wanted to, because Trump's like, for sure, like a lot of the presidents, like, an Israeli guy, he's going to do whatever kind of, whatever favors Israelis' point of view, and Saudi, did Trump step on people's shoes to get to this? How did he play it? And, I'd say like, hey, Trump gets credit for getting the ball rolling, and Biden gets credit for, taking the shot and doing it, but can you speak to Trump's efforts on this?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think if we're looking at assigning blames among presidents, I mean, of course, Trump could have done the right thing from the beginning, but really Bush and Obama are to blame for the Afghan war. And for all Trump's faults, he did sign this agreement with the Taliban. So what happened is I think Trump was just bold enough to make a decision to cut the Afghan government out. The thing was so corrupt that was never going to sign a deal with the Taliban, because they knew if they signed a deal with the Taliban, then the Americans would leave. And so they wanted to prevent that at all costs. And so I think the really bold thing the Trump administration did was cut out the Afghan government and just negotiate with the Taliban. Now they did, I think, make a couple mistakes in this, like agreeing on behalf of the Afghan government to release a bunch of Taliban prisoners. But at the same time, it was a deal had to get done, and it got done. A guy who had largely run around with neocons, Zalmay Khalilzad, who was an Afghan, is the person that Trump put in in charge of negotiating this, and he did a decent job with it. I mean, for everything else in that guy's legacy, this was a victory. And so Trump signed this deal, and right away I said there was a huge problem with the deal because he was signing a deal that was going to, come due 3 months after he left the presidency. I was like, if he doesn't win, then they're not going to leave on May 1st. And I was right about that. Now, I thought they would leave at a far later date than August 31st, but I do think that made a key difference because in Afghanistan, they have fighting generally starts in the spring. Like a lot of these guys are insurgents, they're farmers. So during winter, they don't fight, they plant their crops, then they go fight, right? And so that kind of coincides with May 1st. And so had they left on the schedule, I think the Taliban still would have started their offensive around that May 1st time as they did. But then you have a couple months of a buffer period. I mean, it's not a 2-year Vietnam War decent interval, but it is time for people to get out of the country and stuff like that. And I think that didn't exist because Biden decided to wait till August 31st when the Taliban were literally at the peak of their offensive, what the U.S. was withdrawing. And so that created kind of a really bad optics situation for Biden.
Yeah. And moving forward, and with now our troops out of there, what are the prospects for Afghanistan? They're going to be dealing with, I guess now it's like ISIS-K. I don't know what the K stands for. You can help us out on that one, but and the prospects of, now the narratives are, which they're probably true. There's some truth to that, is that, oh, the women are going to go back to the way it was and different things like that. That buddy that I told you, I told him, I was like, man, we don't know, I mean, they're different now, I remember I saw a Vice video where they were talking to some Taliban, some Taliban soldiers or something. And they were telling them, oh yeah, you see the moon up there? We've gone up there already and different things. And they thought they thought like there's people that didn't know the outside world, but they knew how to fight, so, but I was like, hey, now, they have phones now. They're, who knows, I mean, it could be different. It's not going to be perfect, but it could be different. So what are your prospects, or what do you kind of see how Afghanistan's going to play out here in the future?
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. And at this point, I just don't know. Nobody knows that. I guess maybe some of the Taliban leadership kind of know what their plans are. But I think in large part, it's kind of yet to be determined. And as I say, everything, remember, this is all relative. Like the standard for women in Afghanistan is really, really, really bad. And maybe under the Taliban, it'll be really, really bad. But it's still ugly as hell, right? And so if people really care about this, I really recommend an article. It's kind of a longer piece. It's in the New Yorker by Anand Gopal, where he went to rural Afghanistan, interviewed a bunch of women, and basically what they had to say is that as bad as the Taliban are, the U.S. was an absolute nightmare. They invited in the old warlords. The U.S. would come into their homes and break all their windows. At least the Taliban never, one of their points was at least, they felt more secure in their home with the Taliban in charge than the Americans. Now, there are definitely downsides to the Taliban and everything like that. And it's made clear in that article. But when you don't have hardly any security and you don't have hardly any freedom, however you choose to, what I mean? It's an ugly choice for these women to make. And so it does seem like there are reasons to think that there are going to be some women in Afghanistan who at least live more secure and maybe even slightly more free lives because the Taliban are back in charge. But I don't think that's the general rule. And it's certainly not going to be the case for women in Kabul and the major population centers who did have access to a lot of Western kind of things, they had beauty salons and stuff like that in Kabul. That kind of stuff is probably gonna go, and I do think that is a part of it. Now, people are pretending well, the Taliban are the same group they were in 1999, and while there's maybe no reason to say they definitely won't be, it is like a lot of them have died in the past 20 years. They've gone through several rounds of leadership. If you look at these kids who are like, members of the Taliban now, I shouldn't say kids, but to me, they are, they're like 18 to 25-year-olds. And, now that I'm in my 30s, I call them kids. And, they don't remember 9/11 or know that even happened. And so, are their views different than the Taliban of 20 years ago? I would guess so. I mean, I see these kids walking around with smartphones. I mean, if you see a young man with a smartphone, I bet they're doing stuff on that they shouldn't be. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they assume that they could get away with, maybe a little un-Islamic behavior. And, I'm guessing that kind of changes their outlook on the world in general. Like if you're watching US pop videos and stuff like that. But again, that I don't think the Taliban leadership are necessarily there. The Taliban did appoint their initial like ruling council of Afghanistan, and it is all men. It's all members of the Taliban. It's a lot of like kind of hardline Taliban old school members, but my guess is that Afghanistan, like always, is going to be a fairly local country. There's going to be some places in Afghanistan where women have a little bit more freedom, some places where they have less, and it's going to be ugly. But the US and our allies have committed so many war crimes in the past 20 years in Afghanistan that particularly the US government and the military have no right to judge the Taliban and what they're going to do. We allied with far worse people than the Taliban in Afghanistan. I hope I answered everything you asked there.
Yeah, no, and you went right into the next question I was already thinking, and that was, is anybody going to pay for the war crimes that we committed?
No. I mean, if you want the short answer, no. There are probably some like individuals around the world who may pay. There's like war crimes investigations in Afghanistan. Maybe the US will like conduct some kind of commission if there was someone really atrocious example. But like for the most part, like we bombed the Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kudus in Afghanistan in 2015. As the doctors fled, the pilots of that plane fired machine guns at them to shoot the fleeing doctors. There's just been so many war crimes committed in Afghanistan that I really don't see like in any significant way people being held responsible. I will say, something just to be aware of is not only have the war crimes been committed by the US, but by our Afghan allies. And everybody's talking about how important it is that we bring like our Afghan allies in the military and stuff to the United States. And I gotta say, like, I'm not opposed to immigration, or especially like Afghans who maybe worked for like Western Aid and doling stuff like that out coming to the United States. Some girl who became a doctor in Afghanistan now wants to leave. That all that, no problem with it. However, like, you can go the Operation Paperclip route and start like bringing like actual like war criminals into your country. And I would be very careful, like with the CIA allies. They say they evacuate like 1,000 people out of one of their bases. These could be some like war criminal torture, terrible type of people.
Okay, yeah, so I'll keep an eye out, like locally at the parks, at the monkey bars, make sure that they're not. But man, yeah. So with that, I guess we'll call it a wrap here, man. So last words on the on like looking back, what is your take? Just big mistake, or like what is your take? Just like, man, like, so actually a quick question that I wanted to do before that one was, if a terrorist attack happens, do you think now the US population, because this is what I told my buddy again, I said, hey man, there might be an attack. I was like, but we can't overreact like we did in Afghanistan. We have to just be like, oh shit, let's get the people maybe that you gotta get and this, but let's not go, like, let's not overreact. Do you think that's the case, or is the political weight of something like that happening under somebody's watch, whether it's a Democrat, Republican, whoever, that's just too much fire for them to just leave it as, oh yeah, we're gonna act the right way or something like that?
I don't have much hope on this one, Carlos. I'm gonna be honest. I think especially like right now with Biden in charge, I don't have hope. If a new president gets elected, that maybe things could be different. But with like who's in the administration and kind of who Biden is. I think the U.S. would, maybe we don't send 100,000 troops to whatever country some dude happens to be hiding in that was behind the attack or something like that. I mean, Osama Bin Laden was a Saudi, so it's kind of hard to even say who the U.S. would end up bombing if there was a terror attack. But whatever country was the target of our rage after a terror attack, I think would suffer quite heavily still. I will say, like, I don't want to be like, oh, there's gonna be a terrorist attack or anything like that, but I think it is important to remember that we have spent the past 20 years terrorizing a section of the world, essentially from the Morocco to Philippines, with our drones, with our warlords, with our bombs, our planes, our soldiers, all of our failed humanitarian project. This has ruined countless lives. I don't know how many stories I've read over the years of, the US fires a drone into a car and one kid survives. Like, how many of those kids grow up that one of them wants to take vengeance or something like that? And so if there is something like that happens this time, we have to be ready, and we have to be ready to argue that we can't go charging at our whatever, like a raging bull. There still is this, like, really terrible thing that the US media does, where they'll bring up the victim of something, and whatever that victim says, you have to agree with, or you hate that victim and you think they aren't suffering. And that could not be the case. Like, if some kid whose dad died on 9/11 still really hates Afghans and wants to bomb Afghanistan, like, it's not the biggest deal in the world to change his mind. It's really not. But we also don't have to base our policy of an entire country on whoever is most pissed off about something. And so, we do have to, like, kind of control our and react to things, proportionally. Terrorism is a crime, and there are international arrest warrants, and there are ways to, like, get people responsible for these things without massive military operations that just go to create more terrorism.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that's why, I support your efforts on your podcast. That's why I do what I try to do to maybe, like, waking up some people, wake some people up that might have not heard some of our perspectives. And thank you, Kyle, for coming on. Can you please plug in where people can check out the articles you write, what you're into and all that stuff, please?
Yes. So I'm the opinion editor at antiwar.com. So go there and read the viewpoints every day if you want to see what I think are the most articles in the anti-war movement out there for any particular day. If you want to check out my show and the daily news roundup that I write, you find that at the Libertarian Institute. My name's on the masthead there, so just go libertarianinstitute.org. You find all my work. My podcast is up everywhere people can listen to podcasts. It's also on the Libertarian Institute all podcast feeds. So if you like one of my shows, Scott Horton's show, Pete Quinones, Keith Knight, all the Patrick McFarlane, Tommy Solomons, you can subscribe to it there. And then you can help the show out by buying your Paloma Verde with the promo code PEACE. You get yourself a discount with that. And that's I think that's the last thing I got, Carlos.
All right, fair enough, man. Thank you. And if I had you 2 times, I'm gonna have you a 3rd time for sure. So thank you for coming on, and appreciate your time.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thanks.